Hi everyone. I just wanted to make this video for you guys to summarize what we did this week in week 3 of the semester. And I cannot believe that we're already moving into week 4 of the semester. And by the end of next week, it's going to be October. That actually seems hard to believe. But as I mentioned in class, it does tend to move by pretty quickly. So as you can probably tell, week 3 was a really busy week. So I want you to take some time as we move into week 4 to really digest everything that we've talked about. And that's going to be really important because at the end of week 4 and the beginning of week 5, we're really going to pick up with how to do case law research, and you will be getting your Westlaw passwords, which will help us do that research. So take some time and review your notes from week 3. That would include going over again what the reporter system is, go over what a citation looks like and the concept of parallel citation, because that's really going to help us understand how to find cases. We're going to be naming and learning a lot more reporters as we go forward. The other big piece we talked about this week, of course, is how to start reading a case decision. And I loved the really robust discussion we had today about this particular case and precedent and some of the questions you guys were asking. You're all right on target for learning how to read cases. As I mentioned, one of the biggest features of a legal research class is really being able to get comfortable reading a court case from the beginning of the court case to the end, and not just an excerpt of a court decision that's in a lot of other textbooks. So now you already have one under your belt. You have Costa versus Red Sox. And as I mentioned in class today, by this time next week, you'll have read 2 more complete court cases. So the first one is actually part of your homework. So while I'm here, I just wanted to show you that under homework assignments, here is your anatomy of the case. As I mentioned, there are questions to answer about the case. And the case that you should read for homework is this one here, Adkins versus Jiminy Peak. So it's about an injury at a ski slope. Again, not terribly long. And then you read that case and you answer the questions. But more importantly, I wanted to move on and talk about case briefing. And I actually wanted to refer you to what we talked about in Thursday's class. That would be today, the day I'm making this recording, because we talked about the common elements of every court decision. Every case you read from a appellate court case in Massachusetts all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court has certain elements in common, and this is what they are. Remember, the factual background, the story of what happened to the individuals that brought them to court. The second element is the procedural history. That's the part where we explain how the case got to the court in which you're reading the opinion. So if you're reading a case from the Supreme Judicial Court, we want to know, how did that case get up to the SJC or up to the U.S. Supreme Court? So that's the procedural history. Then we talked about both the issue and the holding. The issue being the legal question for the court to decide. And remember, as we said in class today, there's always at least one legal issue in any appellate court decision. There might be more than one. And then, of course, the holding is the answer to that question. And as we also mentioned, sometimes the court is really nice to us and they actually put language in the court decision that says the issue here is, or the question we're being asked to resolve is. And when you see those words, you circle them and you highlight them. The court also often gives us words like today we hold or today we decide. And when you see something like that, a holding or a decision, you also circle and highlight that because that's a clue that that's the answer to the question. And then the last piece of the decision is the longest, and that's the analysis, which is something we also call the reasoning. How did the court reach its conclusion? And we talked a little bit in class today about the different points of law that the court makes. And each part is referring back to some case precedent. And in that area, that's where the court is explaining how that case precedent is relevant to the case before it today. Because sometimes a case that happens today is super similar to something that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. But sometimes what happens today is like a little bit different than earlier precedent. And so the court will look at the earlier precedent, but explain how today's case is different. Maybe it comes out a little bit differently, maybe it doesn't, but it's all has to do with the precedent and how the court reasons through that. That's the longest and certainly the most challenging part of the court decision because we have to think back about the precedent. So now that you know those aspects of every court case, you are ready to learn how to brief a case. Those elements that we discussed, that's the foundation of a case brief. So in class during week 4, we're going to talk about what the case brief is and why we write it. And we're also going to talk about how to write it. And as mentioned in the syllabus and here on your checklist, if you haven't done so already, please do read chapter 18 of your book. It's literally called Case Briefing and Analysis. It should make some sense to you because we've already talked about the parts of a case brief. So coming into class next week with some of that understanding would be really helpful. I'm going to give you a format to use for the case brief, and we're going to read this case. It's listed here. I told you it has a great name. It's one of my favorite cases. It's called Benushi versus Dorfman. You don't have to write anything about Benushi versus Dorfman. You just have to read it. That's all you have to do is read it and come to class ready to talk about it. Remember, the Atkins case is the one to do for homework. Benushi versus Dorfman, we're going to talk about in class the same way we talked about Costa versus Red Sox. But in class, we're actually going to write the case brief together, part by part, and I'm going to split you guys into groups and have you do some of the drafting together, and then we'll share what we do. And that way you'll have an opportunity to practice writing a case brief right in class. So read chapter 18, read Benushi versus Dorfman to get an idea of what it's about, what happened in the case, the factual background. Look for those clues that we talked about. Where are the facts? Where's the issue? Where's the holding? And we'll talk about that one in class. I just want to show you something about Benushi versus Dorfman. I already have it open on my computer, and here's a copy of it. I want you to see how it actually starts in the middle of the second column of the Northeastern Reporter. So it's another case from Massachusetts. You can see that. Let me zoom in a little bit for you guys. It is a Supreme Judicial Court opinion, but I want you to see that it actually starts from this reporter. It's in volume 780 of the Northeastern Reporter. It begins on page 20, but a little bit different than the Red Sox case, the Costa versus Red Sox, which actually started at the top of the page. This one actually starts in the middle of the second column. This is so not to waste paper. If you're reading it online, it doesn't really matter. But in a book, we talked about the reporter being an actual book where you can turn the pages. If one case like this one, whatever it was, ends on here in the middle of the second column, I'll just zoom out for a second, on page 20, then the next case begins in that very same column. So just because we say a case begins on page 20, don't assume that that always starts at the top of the page. The case could actually start, as it does here, in the middle of the page. And you can see that this one is also a relatively short decision. There's headnotes there, and then the decision itself is really just a couple of pages. So also not terribly long. And then the other thing I want to let you know about Benushi versus Dorfman is feel free to consult a legal dictionary. There's one particular Latin phrase used in the case. I don't want you to get, bogged down with that and do what I used to do, which is I would get to a difficult word or a new word and just be tempted to skip right over it. Instead, take your time with it and look it up in the legal dictionary and see if that helps, just as one of your classmates did in class this week. So that's the plan for week 4. If you haven't done so already, make sure you submit that very first homework assignment, and I will get started grading that. And in the meantime, work on your second homework assignment, which is called Anatomy of the Case. Read chapter 18 and read Benushi versus Dorfman, and we will pick up with that on Tuesday. So have a great weekend, everybody. I think the weather's supposed to be wonderful. Let's continue enjoying this nice fall weather, and I will see you guys all next week. Bye.